They say the loudest sound in the world isn't thunder and it's not an explosion. It's the silent, invisible snap of a heart breaking. Have you ever looked at someone and thought, this is it, this is my forever? That's exactly how I looked at Mark. We had been together for 6 years. 6 long, beautiful years of building a life from the ground up. When we first met, we had nothing. We lived in a tiny apartment, eating cheap noodles, staying up until 2 a.m. talking about our dreams. Mark was ambitious. He wanted to build his own tech company, and I believed in him. I believed in him so much that I worked 2 jobs to pay our rent while he coded in our living room. When he needed a massive loan to get his business off the ground, I co-signed it. I put my own credit, my own future on the line for him. I didn't care about the risk because we were a team. His success was my success. Over the years, the late nights paid off. His company took off. The tiny apartment turned into a beautiful house. The cheap noodles turned into dinners at fancy restaurants. He was finally the CEO he always dreamed of being. He had a luxury car, a circle of wealthy, influential friends, and a public image that screamed success. He had it all, and I was standing right beside him, proud. I thought we were happy. He would hold my hand in public, kiss my forehead before leaving for work, and tell me I was the reason he made it. I trusted him completely. I never checked his phone. I never questioned his late-night business meetings. Why would I? You don't build a fortress with someone and then suspect them of tearing it down from the inside. But that's the thing about perfect illusions. They are fragile. It only takes one tiny crack to shatter the glass completely, and my glass didn't just shatter, it exploded. It happened on a random Tuesday, the kind of completely normal day where you don't expect your entire world to collapse. Mark was in the shower. He had left his iPad on the kitchen counter. Now, I never used his devices, but my phone was charging in the bedroom and I needed to quickly check a recipe for the dinner I was making him. I woke up the screen. He had left his messages app open. I didn't mean to look, I really didn't, but the human eye is drawn to movement, and right at that moment, a message popped up. Last night was amazing. I can't wait until she's finally out of the picture. Love you. I stopped breathing. The kitchen suddenly felt freezing cold. I stared at the screen, my mind refusing to understand the words. The contact name was saved as David Investor. But David was talking about last night. David was talking about someone being out of the picture. David was saying, I love you. My hands were shaking as I scrolled up. The messages went back for months. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a joke. It was a completely different life. David was actually a woman named Chloe. She was a junior executive at his company. I read messages about the expensive gifts he bought her using the joint account I helped build. I read about the weekend getaways they took when he told me he was at tech conferences. But the worst part, the part that made my knees weak, I read his messages to her. He complained about me. He called me boring. He told her that he was only staying with me until his company went public because my name was on the initial business loans and it would look bad for his image if we split up right now. He was using me. I was just a placeholder, a stepping stone he planned to kick away the second he reached the top. I heard the shower turn off upstairs. Panic hit me. My first instinct was to scream. I wanted to march upstairs, throw the iPad at him, and demand answers. I wanted to cry, to beg, to ask him why. Why wasn't I enough? After everything I sacrificed, how could he do this to me? But as I stood there, listening to him whistling in the bathroom, something inside me changed. The sadness evaporated. The tears that were pooling in my eyes suddenly dried up, replaced by a cold, sharp focus. If I confronted him now, he would lie, he would manipulate me, he would try to control the situation. No, he had taken away my past 6 years. I was not going to let him control my future. I carefully locked the iPad, placed it exactly where he left it, and walked out of the kitchen. They say silence is golden, but I learned that silence is actually a weapon, and I was going to sharpen mine. For the next 2 months, I gave an Oscar-winning performance. I cooked his favorite meals. I smiled when he kissed me. I listened to his stories about work. I even washed his clothes, smelling the faint perfume that I now knew belonged to Chloe. It made me sick to my stomach, but I never let my mask slip, not once. Every time he left the house, I went to work. I became a ghost in his life, tracking every single move he made. I didn't just want to leave him. Leaving him meant he got to keep the house, the business, the money, and the girl. He would get to spin the story to his friends, making me look like the crazy ex-girlfriend who couldn't handle his success. I realized something important during those 2 months. Mark loved three things more than anything in the world. First, his company. Second, his public reputation. Third, his flashy group of friends who worshipped him. If I was going to walk away, I was going to make sure he felt the exact same emptiness he forced onto me. I quietly hired an aggressive lawyer. I brought all the original documents from when we started the company. Because Mark and I were never legally married, he thought his business was entirely his. But he forgot one tiny detail. When I co-signed that massive initial loan, the bank required me to be listed as a 40% shareholder of the holding company. Mark had completely forgotten about this early paperwork because over the years, he just assumed he was the sole boss. I also dug into his company's finances. I found out he had been using company funds, investor money, to buy Chloe a luxury car and pay for her high-end apartment. He was hiding it under consulting fees. I had everything: the legal right to freeze his assets, the proof of his financial fraud, and the evidence of his betrayal. But I didn't want to just serve him papers in private. Mark was a showman, he loved an audience, so I decided I would give him the biggest audience of his life. The perfect opportunity was approaching. Mark's company was hosting its annual Founders Gala. It was a massive, fancy dinner party where he invited all his major investors, his snobby friends, and his top employees. The purpose of the night was to secure a new round of multi-million-dollar funding. It was the most important night of his career. Of course, I was invited as the loving, supportive partner. And of course, Chloe would be there, playing the role of the hardworking junior executive. The week before the gala, Mark was in a fantastic mood. He bought me a stunning designer dress to wear. "You're going to look beautiful beside me," he said, fixing his tie in the mirror. "This is our big moment." I looked at him, feeling absolutely nothing. "Yes," I replied softly, "a night no one will ever forget." Behind the scenes, my lawyer had everything ready. The legal notices were drafted. The financial documents showing his fraud were printed. I had copies of every single text message, every single photo, and every single receipt he sent to Chloe. I took all this evidence and loaded it onto a sleek silver USB drive. Then, I reached out to the venue's audiovisual technician. I offered him a very generous tip to let me have access to the main projector for just 2 minutes before the speeches started. I told him it was a romantic surprise for my partner. He happily agreed. The day of the gala arrived. I spent hours getting ready. I wore the dress he bought me, did my makeup perfectly, and walked out to the car looking like absolute royalty. Mark looked at me with pride, completely unaware that he was looking at the architect of his destruction. We drove to the venue. The ballroom was stunning: crystal chandeliers, expensive champagne, and a room full of people wearing thousands of dollars worth of clothes. As we walked in, Mark's friends greeted us. They patted him on the back, calling him a genius. I smiled and played my part. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Chloe. She was wearing a red dress, looking at me with a subtle, mocking smirk. She thought she had won. She thought she was the clever one, sharing a secret with the king while the queen was totally blind. I smiled back at her. "Just wait," I thought, "just wait." At 8:30 p.m., the lights dimmed. It was time for Mark's big presentation to the investors. He kissed my cheek, grabbed the microphone, and walked up to the stage. The crowd clapped. He was in his element, glowing with arrogance. "Thank you all for being here," Mark started, his voice echoing through the silent room. "Tonight is about transparency, it's about trust, and it's about the future we are building together." I slipped away from my table and walked to the back of the room, handing the silver USB to the tech guy. "Play it now," I whispered. Mark pressed the button on his remote to bring up his first slide, a chart showing the company's expected profits. But that's not what appeared on the massive 20-foot screen behind him. Instead, a giant, high-definition screenshot filled the screen. It was a text message from Mark to Chloe. "Company funds cleared. The down payment for your apartment is disguised as a marketing expense. See you tonight, babe." The entire ballroom gasped. It was a collective sound of pure shock. Mark froze. He turned around, confused by the audience's reaction, and looked up at the screen. The color drained from his face so fast he looked like a ghost. He frantically clicked his remote to change the slide. But the next slide was a photo of them kissing on a yacht, a yacht paid for by the investors sitting in the front row. Click. The next slide was a bank statement. It highlighted his illegal transfers from the company account to Chloe's personal account. Click. The final slide was a message he sent about his investors. It read, "These old fools will sign anything I put in front of them. Easy money." The room erupted. It was absolute chaos. Investors were standing up, their faces red with anger. Mark's friends were staring at him in disbelief. Chloe was frozen in her chair, looking around like a trapped animal as people began pointing at her. Mark dropped the microphone. It hit the stage with a loud, piercing screech. He looked out into the crowd, panic in his eyes, searching desperately for me. I was standing at the back of the room, my arms crossed, watching the empire I helped him build crumble to the ground in less than 60 seconds. He ran off the stage and pushed through the crowd toward me. "What did you do?" he hissed, his voice shaking with a mixture of terror and rage. "What is this?" I looked him dead in the eye, my voice completely calm. "You wanted transparency, Mark. I'm just helping you out." Before he could say another word, a man in a sharp suit tapped him on the shoulder. It was my lawyer. "Mark," the lawyer said loudly, ensuring the people nearby could hear, "you are hereby served. My client is exercising her right as a 40% shareholder to freeze all company assets pending an investigation into your financial embezzlement. Furthermore, she is withdrawing her initial capital." Mark stumbled backward as if he had been physically punched. You can't do this. I'm the CEO. It's my company." "Read the founding documents, Mark," I said softly. "You built a house, but you built it on my land, and now I'm tearing it down." I turned around and walked out of the ballroom. I didn't look back. Behind me, I could hear the shouting of angry investors demanding answers, the sound of his reputation being shredded to pieces. Revenge doesn't fix a broken heart, but I would be lying if I said it didn't feel like breathing fresh air for the first time in months. The fallout was spectacular. The investors immediately pulled their funding. Without their money and with his assets frozen by my legal team, Mark's company collapsed within weeks. The board forced him out to save whatever was left of the technology. His friends, the ones who praised his genius, they disappeared the moment his bank account dried up. Nobody wants to associate with a fraud. And Chloe, she packed her bags and left him the moment the luxury apartment was repossessed. It turns out she wasn't in love with Mark, she was in love with the lifestyle he provided. When the money stopped, so did the romance. Mark tried to call me. He sent long, desperate emails begging for forgiveness, blaming the stress of his job, saying he was a fool and that he lost the best thing that ever happened to him. I never replied. I blocked his number, took my portion of the legally liquidated assets, and moved to a new city. I started my own business, this time with my name on the door and my name alone. People often ask me if I have any regrets. They ask if taking it that far, destroying his career and his life, was too harsh. But here is what I learned about betrayal. When someone cheats on you, they aren't just making a mistake. They are making a conscious choice to disrespect your time, your loyalty, and your love. They are looking at the life you built together and deciding it isn't worth protecting. Mark thought my kindness was weakness. He thought my silence was ignorance. He learned the hard way that the person who supports you the most is also the person who knows exactly where all your weak spots are. If you are listening to this and you have been betrayed, let me tell you this: do not let them turn you into a bitter person. Do not let them make you feel like you were not enough. Take your time, feel the pain, cry if you have to, but then dry your tears, be smart, protect yourself, know your worth, and walk away with your head held high. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just taking away what they love, it's showing them that they never deserved you in the first place. And as for Mark, the last I heard, he was working a mid-level desk job, driving a used sedan, and living in a tiny apartment, exactly where he started before he met me. He finally got the life he deserved, and me, I'm doing just fine.